Okay, we are live.
Michael, are you ready? Yes. Oh, do you have to read it? Okay.
Speak up. All right, good morning. In compliance.
I'm going to speak for the speaker.
Hold on. Go ahead.
Good morning. Compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law, section 101.021 of the codified ordinance of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976. Notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the city planning department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting be taken by voice vote. Abstentions from any vote due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the taking of any vote. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, we ask that you use the raise hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. Raise hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile version and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raise hand icon again and mute your microphone. We will also be utilizing the chat feature to communicate with participants. Chat feature can be activated by clicking the chat button located on the bottom of the WebEx screen. Calling users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activity is being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter via our website and email have been considered. We have also received emails from those who have provided written comment on a particular matter. Chairman, review.
Thank you. Michael, call the roll, please. Bowen, present. Downing. Luker. Curry. Gray Scott.
Present.
Paul.
Present.
Light.
Hooper's present.
Luker's present.
Yes, he is.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum. Thank you. Feel free to get start this up, the special presentation.
Yes, this is a special presentation to hear the MidTown Community Vision Plan.
Make sure, excuse me. Make sure, speak up.
Yes, can you hear me clearly?
The microphones are up there.
All right, hopefully everyone can hear me without me yelling. This is a special presentation of the MidTown Master Plan. Joining us today, and who will be presenting on this particular matter, is Jeff Epstein, who is the Executive Director of MidTown. There's Hong of MidTown, Paris Zing, I hope I think okay, and Samara Malone, also of MidTown Media.
Great. Can I be seen on the screen if I stand here, or do I need to move?
You can stand wherever you want.
Okay, I'll stand here. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for lending us some time and coming out to MidTown. We've been working on this plan for the better part of the last year and a half. I'm really excited to share with you today that we're going to kind of tag team present. And just as way of framing, you know, I think MidTown has changed a lot as a place in an organization in the last 5 to 10 years. Our last plan as a neighborhood was a master plan that goes back to 2005, which was before the health line. You think about how much has changed in that time. And this is a plan for the neighborhood, not for organization, although we really, you'll hear some of the things in it. It started to use it as a platform for organizational. strategic planning. And I also want to stress this is a somewhat unique neighborhood plan. It is community-based, place-based, and holistic, and it's intended to really be living and flexible. And it's not really dogmatic in the way that you might see other plans in terms of a specific land use here, a specific thing here. It's intended to be flexible around these principles and strategies, which you'll hear about. So we're really excited to share, and I'll talk a little bit about the process. Maurice, can you click on the slide? Thank you. So just a little background on the objectives of our plan that I shared, really talking about the different identities of the different areas within Midtown. And we spent a lot of time really focusing on what the priorities were for this in terms of integrating a lot of the work that's going on in the community, integrating community voices. So I'll start with a geography. This is the geography we're talking about. But as you'll see in some of the maps, one of the things this plan acknowledges is that these are artificial boundaries, and the things that are happening around are going to shape what's happening within Midtown, and the things that are happening in Midtown are going to shape what's going on around. So we had an extensive community process that started way back in May of 2020 through COVID. So we managed this entire engagement process during COVID, but I think really had some diverse ways in which people engage with the plan. You can see the numbers here in terms of the small groups, the kitchen table conversations, the interviews with residents, and a bunch of small focus groups that were engaged. We had an online community survey. We had this really interesting online collaborative map tool that we put out where people could go and identify a spot within the neighborhood and comment on something they liked, they didn't like, they wanted to see change there. That all fed in. We were out tabling at Dave's, collected a lot of feedback from community members on chalkboards that went into the planning process. And so really the data, I think, was a mixture of hard data and soft community data that we pulled together with our consulting team to shape the plan. And out of all that data came a number of headlines. And I'm going to share some of the background data that kind of shaped our understanding of where the neighborhood is today. And then I'm going to turn it over to Joyce, who's going to share a little bit about the vision and goals that came out, and the Joyce and Karis and Sam are going to tag team. So first off, land use map as we sit today, and you can see this bright constellation of color. We are a diverse neighborhood in terms of uses. You know this if you've been here. Tons of different types of uses. Interestingly, only 7% of our land use is residential, which you know, I think if you've been through the neighborhood too, it feels very commercial. About 1,100 housing units. When we look at population density, a couple of things pop up here. One is, if you looked at that land use map and you looked at this population map, you'll see we're a patchwork. People see different things when they look at Midtown. We also are at the intersection of a bunch of diverse communities. We've got the Asiatown community to the north around Hain. We've got really robust Black communities surrounding us on all sides, and then you can see the white community up in St. Clair Superior. So we are kind of sit at the intersection of a bunch of these different diverse communities, and we have housing, but we're not the center of our own community in terms of housing. It's not like the Midtown neighborhood is a housing identity, but we've got some, as we said, sprinkled around. We also looked at where people live and where people work. So these are where people who work in Midtown live by concentration area, and I think this reinforces that our location sitting between downtown and Cleveland Clinic and University Circle is a huge asset in terms of employment centers. And also really, I think, highlighted for us the need to be a pipeline for job accessibility. We are convenient. We have a lot of jobs. We're convenient to a lot of residential neighborhoods, and we really need to think about that pipeline aspect. Another couple of things that came out of the headlines, and this really, I think, was new for us, was a resounding amount of conversation around community health. And this map illustrates our lack of green space within Midtown. We've got one little teeny park and Don Tavern sitting right next door. Is evidence, one way of how to think about community health, and you'll hear a lot more of that community health theme as we go through the plan, as well as the idea of a lack of a gathering space. The consultants did some really interesting mapping around street frontage. looking at and categorizing every square foot of our street frontage into one of these four buckets: active, privately active, somewhat active, and inactive. And again, not surprisingly, if you want, have been in Midtown, only 12% of our street frontage is active. We've got a ton of inactive street frontage. And this is, I think, just the way that Midtown evolved and came together over the years. And it reinforces, I think, this idea of really needing a place to bring people together, to bring people out into community. Here's a photo from a pre-COVID concert that we had out in the front yard here at the Tech Hive, and really did a lot of thinking around where that public space could be, because we do have a lot of open spaces within Midtown. Another one of the big headlines that animates the whole plan is the idea of Midtown being designed to be a pass-through. We over years have evolved. Chester, 6 lanes, high speed; Carnegie, high speed, and Chester was one of these urban renewal projects that really literally ripped a tear in the neighborhood fabric. And I think really thinking about how we were designed to funnel people from the suburbs to downtown, and from downtown to University Circle. And what is designed can be undesigned. And I think Chester is a big piece of that as a barrier. And we looked at, the street connections. You could see the vibrancy and the strength of vibrancy, something out there, but the connectivity of these streets east-west. And then when you look north-south, there's a whole lot of choppiness on these streets as far as how they dead end into Chester, they dead end into Euclid. So we're designed for this east-west path through, but not so much for north-south. And when we look at traffic, that reinforces, the huge amounts of cars, 25,000 plus on both Chester and Carnegie. And so, kind of collectively, we came up with these series of 8 headlines that kind of walk through some of the data background that I think were really important in terms of using community voices, community data, as well as hard data to kind of inform an understanding of the identity of our neighborhood today as we think about where we're going in the future. So I'm going to turn it over to Joyce to talk a little bit about the vision.
Just before George starts, Diane Down is on the call now. So she's added.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Do we want to pause for any reactions before we move into?
Yeah, I was hoping that, because I wanted to
Go ahead.
just ask a couple of
Yeah.
questions as Jeff was speaking. The 2 maps that were really compelling. One was the active frontage.
Yes.
That tells a lot, because it seems as if they're there, but you don't know they're there. And you have a lot of organizations where you have people who are going in working.
Absolutely.
You don't see them working. And the only time that you probably see them is either coming in and possibly. And that was very telling. And then the map would show the population demographics, but it also revealed the level of density as to where those clusters exist, right?
Absolutely.
So it becomes extremely apparent what you said, and I think the maps are really telling about this with respect to this, acting as sort of a commercial neighborhood. And the question is, how does that evolve? And hoping as you continue to, explain the vision, how do you do a 180? You don't want to do a 360. You want to do maybe a 180 to try to, create that mix to kind of capture that folks. It's almost, it reminds me of the issue that we deal with these campuses from hospitals. We have people going in, that they're all day and they're going out. How do you capture it? You're living, playing, investing. You want their money or even their time in this neighborhood somehow. And I'm interested to see how you overcome that, because this is a very difficult prospect and a very interesting planning challenge, because I don't think there's any neighborhood like this.
But I would tell you, there's people that live there. I ran into a friend of mine that used to live by me when I lived on Clifton. She lives down here now. She loves it. She lives in the Project Sustainable Community. And she just thinks it's great. So, there is a grouping of people that want to be here. It's just lack of product, because it seems like the product's full, ones that are here.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot more interest in residential development. We've got a couple hundred units under construction right now, and about another 1,000 in pre-development. So I think it's thinking about how all of this weaves together, like the patchwork, the proximity to dense neighborhoods, the pass through, the inactive street frontage. How do we start to tell a different narrative about how that all comes together, and from a planning point of view, take major steps that start to address and remedy some of these negative pieces of the pass through, the lack of gathering space, right? These are things we can do something about.
It's like the location. So.
But, you know, the pass-through, when you talk about pass-throughs, that's how people get familiar with the state. So Chester is not a bad procession. I think cars move too quickly through it, but it's not a bad processional. So I think a number of people that are going through, maybe, you know, if they slow down a little bit, they would want to stay.
Right, it's aesthetically, no,
Right.
it's not, but back to this lane. How convenient it is just to come back. It's not nothing more, right?
Right.
It's one dimensional with respect to this cars, and you get this.
It's also lane width.
Yeah.
So the intuitive speed goes up because they're wide lane. So people intuitively go faster. And then, of course, you have the people driving to the hospital. They want to get to work.
The last point real quick, because the infrastructure conversation. Imagine these corridors. How do you introduce multimodal transportation? That's going to be
Like PowerPoint piece, Maurice. But to your point, Freddie, director, you're just hitting the nail on the head in terms of easy to get there, easy to leave. So people are like, kind of like McDonald's, like, downtown. And I think, we really want to change that because people do live here or people have a history here. And we want to reflect the experience of people who, have been here, maybe their families have been here for a while, and who also come like to work to enliven the neighborhood. So, so we had this amazing process where we had all this engagement, very deep focus groups, and this vision that arose out of it was not just like our staff, not just our consultants, but it was really taking all the themes that were coming out of the discussions. And so we have this very lengthy vision. I do want to read it aloud though, because I think it captures the spirit and not just the land use, but also like the feelings and the emotions, the spirit of the place. The Midtown neighborhood, so let me start. Our vision is that the Midtown neighborhood is at the intersection of several neighborhoods: Asiatown, Hub, Central, Fairfax, and Downtown. Home to a wide variety of individuals, industries, and organizations, the Midtown community benefits from the connectedness of its stakeholders, physically and socially. Midtown's location, supportive business community, and unique programming connect people with job opportunities, helps us to retain a diverse mix of businesses, and create inclusive pathways for growth. The Midtown neighborhood is a place for connection, belonging, and a joyful celebration of the patchwork of cultures and communities that make up Midtown. In Midtown, prosperity is reinvested in the community. Equity and inclusion are fundamental expectations, and innovation helps families realize the opportunities promised to generations. Midtown residents are involved and empowered to be self-sufficient and drive change in the neighborhood. Our many voices are amplified in public spaces, and the streets are alive with activity. People of all backgrounds find wellness and healing, lifted by a network of purpose-driven partners. Now and in the future, there everyone in this. So some of the things I want to lift up out of this is this idea of connectivity that I think a lot of folks kind of go to their specific destination and come out. But that businesses, residents, organizations, they will all benefit if we are more knit together. Also wanted to lift up the people element, that when we think about land use planning and master planning, that it's really about people and their experience at the center, and that everything physical, is a reflection of. And so we envision having a strong network of residents that feel like this is their place, and I'm reflected in the place. And then finally, I want to highlight just the middle paragraph because I think that is kind of our driving vision, is that it's really this place of belonging and joyful celebration. That's the vibe that you should feel when you come to that. There is a reflection of culture and connectivity. So with that very grand vision, very aspirational vision, start to think about goals. How do we begin to achieve this vision? Some of these goals are familiar to Midtown, so growing Midtown's business and innovation economy as a commercial district and as the health tech corridor, quote, unquote. You know, this will continue to be a theme because we do attract organizations, practices, have over 50 nonprofits that call Midtown home. 80 nonprofits that call Midtown home. And so there are also some new goals for us. Goals like creating places, programs, and spaces that welcome everyone. Really focusing on creating an environment of health and wellness. That is using the sort of organizational mind and land use planning new to us in Midtown. Amplifying Midtown's identity and history. And we are very specific about the use of the word amplify in that create. Don't intend to create a whole new identity that's got this like faux branding behind it. It's recognizing that there were lots of people who have called Midtown home, whether for Leo's Casino is a great example of this. So when we heard from residents that Leo's Casino, which is this jazz Midtown club, was located on the eastern end of Midtown, we could not find a trace of Leo's there today. Even the marker that was there from the rock hall was torn up during the demolition and the installation of the building that's there. And so you kind of see this erasure and this trauma, and especially because of the racial trauma that is there. And I think our goal is not to make up a new identity, but it's to amplify what in our recent past actually has been there. And finally, a goal that has been a part of our thinking for a while is just pursuing racial equity in all that we're doing, especially with land use, because we know that land is not a blank slate. It has history, it embodies the history of the people come before. And so we need to understand the ways that we have intentionally or unintentionally impacted lands for good or for bad, and to acknowledge that and work to So from those goals are these very holistic set of strategies. There's 20 of them. We're not going to go through all of them. So that would be. We want to really focus in on some of the stuff dealing with land use because that feels relevant to Planning Commission, but we wanted to put this up here to show that there is a layer of culture, right? We want to think about elevating Black and Asian creative voices. We want to think about more art and color. We want to be a hub, again, of Black history, entrepreneurship, and celebration. There's also the connectivity part between people, so connecting neighbors block by block, building youth resilience. These are all strategies that are a part of making a strong neighborhood, but we may not necessarily focus on that as much today. But at the end of our presentation, we can dig in if we want some of those strategies.
Yeah, I do want to say that this is very important.
Yeah.
I think us as a commission, planning and development is not just about the person that have not seen it. It's a very human. So those things are so highlighting that we're not
Okay.
because I think it's really important, not just given the current climate, but in the why we make investments in development. So it's important to understand side of all of these planning initiatives, at least from our perspective.
Let's talk about some of the strategies that kind of when we get through the presentation. There are a few that might be interesting. Like I think we could dig into the Black history. We could dig into connecting neighbors. So let's put a bookmark in it and come back. Just how it works, these strategies don't perfectly nest under the goals, but they're all sort of interconnected and interwoven. However, we do want to present sort of clusters of strategies, focus on one or two. So this is really around the very thing you noted, Director, about how do we sort of turn a 180 to the neighborhood that is very, very commercial, pretty corporate facing at the time now. And so one of the strategies we wanted to dig into is this idea of encouraging new housing developments. So there's only 1,300 units of housing that exist in Midtown, scattered all around, as you saw. And so part of Midtown should be encouraging and attracting mixed income housing. I want to say that we also, in conjunction with this plan, did an equitable housing study with funds from enterprise housing. And what that looked at was it took an audit, quote unquote, of all the existing units, compared it to the AMIs of the neighborhood and the city to see where the gaps were. And while we don't have that study to present today, it's a very important part of shaping how we think about housing, especially regarding affordability. So a one-bedroom affordable unit, a one-bedroom could be considered affordable, but in terms of space for a family, if average median income and what does the family fit, right? Are we trying to attract families? Are we trying to attract young people? And thinking about that pretty holistically. In terms of the mapping, here are some areas of opportunity. The yellow areas in particular are areas to strengthen in terms of residential and mixed use and mixed use. And you can see there's this idea of really connecting North and South to the communities that have that density, you know, have that existing sort of residential fabric just to make it blend. You see on the east end between 71st and 79th Street that there's a heavier focus on residential infill. And it's going to be this transition area from what is a very, you know, commercial or innovation based. Asia Town, which is very much neighborhood retail and residential, is about residential stabilization and infill development there. Of course, mixed use districts that is closer to where CSU is and the downtown area, probably going to see more market rate and higher end rentals just because of how the market is driving at that. So if we kind of reimagine our land use map, remember in the beginning it was just sort of a jumble, starting to pull together some more thematic land uses together and sort of pull together where the industrial commercial already existing and trying to kind of shape much more mixed use around those areas to create more active street frontages.
Now, one of the things, just with respect to land utilization, is form-based zoning. And the town, its use district was an early example of the intentionality of like a formal sort of approach to the world. And I think by identifying these districts and sort of having that desire statement and being able to codify that and give the type of investments that will create those districts. Seeing that with respect to the whole Midtown application. So we have to marry the land use with the codifying of that stated desire.
I am noticing that I'm a little bit slower, so I'm going to try to pick it up a little bit. So in terms of strategies around infrastructure, really important conversation. Sam and I will highlight, you know, some street infrastructure as well as street infrastructure. Talk about Chester, how it's been sort of a traumatic scar on the community. Jeff emphasized the fact that it is quite out of the city, and residents were pretty loud and clear about ways that they feel disconnected through these structural elements. And so what we've proposed is that And it's kind of hard to see just because of how the projector is showing. You'll see these little nodes where we want to kind of highlight the places of celebration, key intersections like Euclid and 55th, Euclid and 66, Carnegie and 77th, where there's a retail node. And then really focus on community crossings north and south with these solar yellow orangish dots, north and south across Chester. It's problematic right now because there's actually no walk signals. There's only one at 55th. So it's really critical that we're starting to press actually across the street. The watershed perspective, it's really a 5-minute walk from any of the health light stops. It's a 5-minute walk to Health Ed. So you would not feel that way if you were walking across the street. Feels like it's a local park. A lot of feedback we got was that it's busy, it's noisy, it's thoroughfare, and what if we could reimagine Chester Avenue? We heard from our consultants and other transportation consultants that Chester Avenue gets 35,000 cars a day, but that 35,000 cars can fit on a total of 5 lanes. Fit on what is like a. So if you take what is 6 lanes plus a turn lane in the center, reduce it down, you could have extra space for multiple bike path, sidewalks, expanded green infrastructure. And so this is like a big challenge to sort of our car culture. Really allow people to utilize movement.
So when I look at this, I'm looking at 3 12-foot lanes. The intuitive speed is much higher. I'm assuming that's going out of the city instead of towards the city. Am I wrong?
I see what you're saying. Exactly. That center one is a turn lane.
Okay,
So there's
there's 2 and 2,
2 and 2, yeah.
but why do you need 12-foot lanes? Why couldn't they be 11 or 10? Drop the intuitive speed of the car. And I know ODOT has some very specific thoughts about that, but I think that needs to be a discussion.
Just for a point, what do you mean by intuitive speed? Even though you may have 5 posts that says 35 miles an hour, on the street, program a person mind as to how fast they do things, you know, always the dominant method of travel, by that, which not by the stop.
12-foot lanes are over 55 miles. So you're enabling them to want to go that fast potentially.
Do you wonder if it is part of that because I know they have specific.
But I think it's a good discussion.
Push on them.
Yeah, I think the overall.
Maybe if we do one, and then maybe you can shrink the other one down. I think 1 12-foot, the rest are small.
I think the overall point on this is we're flexible on the ways that Chester gets addressed, but the proposal here is that Chester goes from 7 lanes to 5 lanes, making it easier to cross, slowing traffic down, not dramatically impacting times, but making a huge impact both in terms of perception and ability to connect.
Sure. And I think that's the discussion about start early, because otherwise they.
They'll just assume that it's the set.
That's right.
I'd like to say if there's gonna be a challenge on 79 Chester, where you have that extra lane that turns to the right. I never understood that today in my life, so.
I was-
Oh, that's-
I like the usual, that- I used to like to do that.
You just see the book. I want to point out too, one thing that's not quite shown in this particular street section, but that median widens out into. And you have transitioning over to green infrastructure, actually money to plant trees, of which we have requested some into the median of time. Hopefully as that tree canopy grows and also slow.
The other thing I would think about is the width of the tree line. Because
Yeah.
what'll happen is, as people go, and there's, Chester, there's not a lot of crosswalks. Where there are, someone pulls in the back side, having that buffer between pedestrian area and the other areas. The other thing I would think about is how do you separate bike path from the walking path a little bit? Because bicycles aren't always polite, people walking dogs, the people might be polite, but dogs are always, especially if things speeding by
Yeah, you're right.
and if the next one misses.
All right, so green infrastructure has been a major part. So just to contextualize what I mean by saying green. That's open green space, that's parks and that. So as many of us know, Black and brown. Environment, and that leads to a host of adverse impacts on our. And so we're actually working on a few initiatives. First thing, we receive funds from the county as well. So with that work, we not only get the process existing conditions. So with that work, we're able to really understand the hard data that and so aside from understanding hard data, philosophically, you just understand it. So that's just one of the green projects. Summer project work. We acquired 2 parcels of land on the park design process. The next steps to kind of look at this process will create more green space in the neighborhood. Yeah, so on to my next slide, and in the same vein of having lack of access to community gatherings, specifically community gathering space that's reflective of. So what is the potential like is outdoor venue or actual physical community? But regardless, we're interested in. Go onto a few other slides to kind of show some node areas that we've identified. Opportunities. Right there. Just kind of looking at how we categorize and have access to playgrounds as well as sports work, recharging, gardening, or other environmental elements, or gathering space for meals, celebrate, and entertain. So this map right here is just identifying some of the nodes that we have that are potential opportunities for open space, already starting to organically. So this first visual element, this vision that we began to cast around, that looks like the activation first opportunity, as you can see just past the road, like an urban orchard garden, and I think it's also very easy to put out an RFQ corner of East 50. This will be the first project that will find. So another potential node is right here at 77 our neighborhood where we budding food hub starting to emerge and has been for quite some time. We're envisioning what that looks like. This is actually one of the renderings that we have that really all of the different elements that after coordinated green space, that's having some type of shared, eating. Those things and sidewalks. They're really.
I think it's in Sam's passing. I think one of the points that we want to make on the last rendering, these are not, this is exactly what must happen here. These are examples of how we weave these strategies into place.
One thing, that you have one slide on show section, that's an experience. Got a light right there. That's not what you're seeing there. So thinking about the underbelly of those bridges and things like that, it's important. That should be live, but that, how you treat that intersection, that's what this is.
So I'm just gonna stand because I think it's easier to hear me. I know it's smaller. So kind of, I think some of these strategies build on one another. So I think some of these kind of dovetail a little bit with some of the infrastructure pieces Sam and Joyce have already talked about. But I'm gonna dive into these two strategies specifically, thinking about Asia Town as a home for the AAPI community, which came out of a neighborhood of a strategic vision plan specifically for Asia Town that I'll talk about a little bit more, and also upgrading Payne as an anchor of Asia Town. So I think, again, these strategies build on a strategic vision that we completed in 2020, which really captured a lot of voices from the Asia Town community. Things like community members saying, some of our seniors who've lived here for decades saying, we want a place where we no longer feel like foreigners. Some of our parents saying, we want a place where our kids can celebrate, learn, and share and celebrate their heritage, their culture. They can see their language in the neighborhood. They can feel proud of who they are. And this culture of community care that we really saw in our community, that people really felt, we heard from people that they felt at home for the first time in Asia Town after decades of living in the area. And so these are aspects that we really wanted to incorporate into this neighborhood vision plan to lift up specifically around Asia Town. And so again, I think these kind of dovetail with a number of the other strategies, but specifically thinking about, we'll dive into this one about upgrading Payne as an anchor. And so that's a piece that we, wrong way. That's a piece that we heard a number of times. Asia Town, when you're there, if you know, there's a lot of places, but they can feel kind of scattered and there doesn't feel like one physical anchor. And Payne being the center, being a key commercial corridor, feels like a real opportunity there. And so there are a number of aspects incorporated into this strategy, things such as infilling the right mix of amenities and businesses, adding on the existing commercial activity that kind of bookends along Payne Avenue in Asia Town, taming Payne Avenue. So some of the aspects we kind of talked about on some of our other corridors. And here's an example of what that could look like. So we came to, actually, I'm working with a group called the People Streets with Nicole and other members of the planning department and an incredible other group of grassroots community members thinking about this aspect of Payne Avenue. So on a slightly smaller scale, but not much smaller, Payne Avenue is almost 60 feet, the equivalent of 5 or 6 drive lanes, parking lanes, which are unmarked. And so cars really speed down that road. And the last traffic counts were about 6,000 cars per day, and that was when the Dave's was still located on Payne. So you can imagine how much lower they are at this point. And so here's an example, not a specific design, but just an example to show that Payne could have a road diet. We could go down to 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction, and have space for cyclists, more space for pedestrians. The sidewalks in spaces that they are tight could, experience a little bit of growth. And there could be marked parking lanes to make the feeling as you're saying as you're going up a street that is narrower where cars don't feel the freedom to speed so quickly. And just emphasizing that that is a project that kind of a group is already working towards. Thank you. I know we came to Planning Commission last month, and so thank you for kind of seeing that proposal, which aligns with this plan. And so, sorry, keep going the wrong way. Here is just kind of an example of, this is an existing photograph of Payne Avenue and East 33rd Street, which kind of just shows as an example the opportunity here on Payne Avenue. And here's just an example of how a number of actions, if they were to be co-located right at this intersection, how it could look. And so this is meant to be a lot of different actions that are in the plan put onto one example rendering to show how much more it could kind of fulfill some of these strategies and examples. So things like more artwork and color that reflects the neighborhood, things such as space for pedestrians and cyclists that they can feel comfortable crossing the street, space, multilingual banners and businesses and public spaces and gathering spaces that show people that they belong and can feel comfortable gathering in.
One question before you transition.
Yes.
I noticed that you showed the decorative crosswalks.
So, yep,
So we do have, this is important, this is really important. We have regulations that allow for that to occur. However, now, what that means is that if this is a desire, you have to advocate to get that ordinance changed and to advocate to council, traffic engineers and others to modify the regulations so that this can happen. See, a lot of barriers as to why things can't happen is not because of a lack of desire. It's always a regulatory or financial reason of some sort that needs to be overcome. So these strategic moves that you outlined, understand what the current roadblocks are. There's your point of attack. So that's really to Jeff, you know, there needs to be a conversation with council and others about how we can expand that. Got to consider residential. First came online, that took a lot of acts on behalf of our department, for example. They were allowing it on alleys, courts, and ways. Pointless. That means back alleys that nobody can see right. You see what I'm saying? So that was a BS move. So the question becomes, how do you get the establishment to change rules so that these things can happen? You know, because it's frustrating being on the city side, and we want to just let you do, you know, but the roadblocks are there that have to be legitimately overcome.
And I do just want to clarify, I appreciate that sentiment,
Sure.
Director, and that's really great to hear. But I do want to clarify that through the People Streets work, we have kind of advanced plans for a decorative crosswalk, not to the decoration of this scale, but still one that is colorful, simple, and beautiful. And that meets the existing guidelines. So I think it is important to show that we are kind of work within that. But thank you for that push because it can be
But I think if we're gonna do something that feels like Asian town, because it does. And the products that, when I go back for China, you know, you're in China, there's products there that we don't see here, you know, and it's housing and stuff like that, and it's how they put them together and sizes and stuff like that. So we do those kind of things in the parks that are there, you know, are different than the parks that are here. So we make that bridge, bring some of that capability here, because the parks are great. We need to start transplanting them here. I've never seen anyone play badminton.
We actually do have some people, so I will just say as a segue, even though this is not saying exactly what will happen in this particular space, we have kind of taken use of a vacant parking lot, and there have been families that have been playing badminton there. And we have a group who dances there on the weekends, and so there is a little bit of that activity. And so our goal is just to provide a space to enhance it and allow it to happen.
Yeah, it should feel more like.
Yeah, well,
Popping up on vacant lots and big lots, like there really should be a lot more infrastructure and thankfully we see some funding to move that forward. Started last week. And so I think a lot of that is this idea of connecting neighbors block by block. A lot of that reason why people feel like they can't parking lot now is because our Asia Town community organizer empowered residents to start organizing themselves. Started to act. Know that there's a that's
Especially now that the state's gonna have more brownfield balance and stuff
Yeah.
like that, I think brownfield in place, you know, age decrease.
So I want to just kind of show these other groupings of strategies, which we can dive into for further discussion. So we just wanted to share also something really exciting about the way that our plan is packaged. And while we do have, you know, full of all this information, instead of having a big bound copybook that is read by planners in our office, we really wanted to reflect the amount of community engagement that happened. And for all of us to feel engaged in building a neighborhood together. So you'll see in front of you this instruction manual. It's really actually captures the vision, the strategies, the goals, and also the people involved. And then you'll see here a deck that has all the actions that fall under those strategies. What's really great about it is that we don't necessarily, as MidTown organizations, we don't need to be in the room. We can give this to them. Where are the areas that you feel passionate about? Oh, because it's a huge plan. It's a plan, and us, how can we provide that support and infrastructure to make that we can do? You'll see on each card that there is that specific action highlighted in bold. Some near-term actions that, and then at the bottom, the type of action. Some are event planning, some is advocacy, you know, actual. And at the very bottom, you know, what we need. This particular action, we need artists and ideas to help us be involved. So, for 20 strategies. Say thank you. If you have any questions about other strategies, like have them in.
And I just, one more thing about how we envision this plan. We have physical decks of cards which we're distributing to key partners. We have an online website that has all the cards in good law. When we put the RFQ out, Sam mentioned we put an explicit link to the plan, and we hope that as developers come to present on projects in MidTown, that they're going to start referencing different aspects of this plan, that should be the criteria, one of the criteria for projects. How well are they meeting the goals articulated by the community in this plan? And that developers can pick out different pieces, the community partners can pick out, that we can like play cards with resident groups during community meetings. What is the card? What is the area you're passionate about? Let's look at these pieces and figure out how you can.
Our side, we did. Yeah, this is great.
This is your job for the weekend, right?
And hopefully we're accomplishing this first action.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah,
So let me just kind of talk about why behind it. So from a planning perspective, citywide, we have to 77 square miles of city, different neighborhoods. Some by Farmdale, but they may support the other. But these plans are important as far as the planning commission. For how so one component of that is codifying how the community part. The other component is from the advocacy standpoint. Really helps us to understand what we need in the neighborhood. The other, component is from a, resource side. How do we take limited resources? I don't care how good the economy is, public resources always have to be able to be strategic about where we spend those resources, create the most. So the plan is designed to inform us. How it's all coalesced together, comprehensive, our current lines, very detailed. And we're about to re-up on that. 21st century. These documents that you will provide and other neighbors, called one bill, all the other planning initiatives, those really get upvoted, particularly those themes, those because they form our citywide values, right? So that we're operating in a rhythm, line, right? Of course, it's politics and other things that get right, but that's sort of the sail that kind of keeps it same sort of direction, right? This is why these things are important. So I want to emphasize that and how important these options are. Because without that, we plan from on high. We don't grow like that. So it's very important for us to be able to connect on what the community is saying. It has to be something that's documented. So just to let you guys know, that's how this information is. And when development interests come into this footprint, want to build, we're the body that has to be that clearinghouse for ignorance. How are you conforming? How are you meeting the spirit of it? That is what the commission meetings for that advocacy, for those conversations to happen. I thought that was an important concept. Why it matters.
Okay, commission members, questions, comments?
August, I think maybe.
August, turn your mute off.
It is off. I don't know.
There you go. Oh, boy.
I know something's happening with my jack on my computer. I don't think it works anymore.
Oh, okay.
This is a great plan. I just would like to hear what your strategy might be relative to planning housing, how coordinated it needs to be around the periphery. And it's, those lines are never hard, right? So that, we're bringing the right product online. We're not competing against one another. We're making sure that we're bringing or rising the tide together. If someone could address that.
Great question.
Yeah, I think the plan is explicit about the desire to add more housing and more housing of different types. It also has some strategies around how to try to preserve affordability of existing housing, which I think is important. The affordable housing study that Joyce mentioned, it really looked at the nature of the housing we have. We are a committed organization.
Yeah, I was there. I did have it. You guys will-
Filling in.
Just a second, Jeff. Jeff, I hear some other conversations. I can't.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
No, I'd say I think as an organization, I think we're very committed to adding in both affordable and market rate housing, being really open to innovation around different housing typologies. I think the reality of the geography that we have within MidTown itself, going to tend itself less towards single family units and more towards either apartment buildings, condos. But I think we are we are working with the Mikos Foundation, St. Louis Superior, other neighbors around really thinking about the type of housing that's coming in. But with every developer, we're having a conversation about the relative affordability of the house. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you, Jeff.
And I would go to worker housing.
Yeah,
There's not enough to talk about worker housing. What does that look like? What does it feel like in affordable
Hey, Freddie,
Yes, sir.
sorry, I'm sorry, did I cut someone off?
That's okay, August, go ahead.
This is maybe a sort of the question for us all. Um, relative to Chester, I've been living that whole exercise for the last 20 something years, even trying to navigate as an individual, which is not easy. What's the likelihood, Freddie, of that becoming a priority, for planning to reconfigure that street, slow down the traffic, obviously, and make that connectivity a lot more graceful and respectful?
Yeah, I think it starts with the advocacy and the plan. What people have to understand is from a planning perspective, we often have to act as advocates to the powers that be. That means MoCap, that means the mayor to prioritize. I think the comprehensive plan adoptions, that platform, to be able to bring that conversation and feel forward and and those who will be taking office in January 5th will see how that works with respect to making the hard choices about where you invest. And I think Chester and Carnegie, a lot of these arterials that come in and out of the neighborhood have been on the radar screen enough where they can bubble up to the surface. Fortunately, given the infrastructure bill that was signed by President Biden Monday, some resource opportunity that an easy conversation, hopefully, with the new administration. All right, and I think it's important to be able to plans in front of the capital projects office to see what this philosophy of the administration is going to be with respect to how they prioritize multi-road road diets. Our streets. Now that's something we've been outing for a long time, but there has to be the policy and action to enforce that. So my answer to that question is that the verdict is still out. I think that will be as the administration see where their head is with respect to a lot of the issues around multimodal transport, our roadway, and applying the resources to do. So obviously the potential is there. Again, it's a matter of the individuals' power that are willing to put the trigger.
I'll add, I think we're willing organizationally on the Chester conversation, and I know this has had a number of conversations with the planning folks that are neighboring CDCs because Chester covers a number of different service areas, and this is now part of the overall neighborhood plan that is okay. Clearly we need to get some more definition about the need Chester, and it has a different. There's similar issues in each neighborhood that it crosses, but Chester has a different feel, different neighborhoods, and it may be, with working with the city, try to launch a planning effort specifically on Chester, and that's something certainly we talked about.
And also, we'll highlight, you got to be thinking, when we did the Midway analysis citywide, Chester was one of the top streets. So, yes, that was very aggressive. The fact that Chester was a priority, thinking totally helps that narrative, that conversation.
We just haven't thought about it for a moment. Any other commission members? Comments, questions? Tommy?
Oh, one thing I didn't hear that I expected to hear from MidTown of all places, the public art conversation, which is huge. Obviously, how does the plan address sort of the public art, not just strictly from an aesthetic point, but from an opportunity and stuff.
So I think there are two strategies that stand out. There is the more art and color strategy, and then the uplifting Black and Asian.
Okay.
Kind of coming together to. Cleveland Walls was a wonderful experiment. It was a ton of work. It was amazing to see it all unfold. And we were really intentional about making sure we're heavily represented, the local artists. And I think actually one of our opportunity points. So what we're thinking about is doing something very good. But that is a lot of process that we're sure.
Like Philly, for example, they did a really good job.
Yeah.
Pretty wide, pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
The applications that they use. I was talking to Tar about this. You know, we gotta put our money where our mouth is. Money is so important.
Yeah.
Public art is a hustle. You know, percent for the art ordinance that, you know, shaves off some infrastructure dollars for public art. I think this is a step.
Yeah.
It needs to be like an 9%, you know, for this. A committed set of resources that can be pulled from to implement these public art initiatives. And, you know, as far as the maintenance of public art is always left up to somebody. We don't do it. You know, but it's an infrastructure. Is what it is. I think there needs to be some sustenance with respect to maintaining these pieces, you know, because it goes down to placement, particularly ones that are located street. Like that 55th Street image that you show, you know, it's crying for public art.
Yeah.
You know, and there's other strategic locations that are going to act as draws. And Fred Bidwell's initiative, which I thought was interesting, because that drew attention. You know, like I remember vividly, my family and I, the exhibit that I found most interesting was Big Hand Circle. Silver Hand. That was dope. People remember that stuff. Yeah. Creating that type of experience, I think, is really what we need to see more of.
I like the spiders. Remember the big spiders?
Yeah.
Those were very cool.
I didn't like the rubber duck.
Yeah, I do.
The animals. It was different. But
Yeah. So there was a bit about health and wellness. Obviously, we're pretty close to health and wellness facilities. You ever thought about reaching for some, maybe to put a blue zone in, live longer and better? And I think Google it. How do you become a blue zone? How do people take a look at, oh, you're from MidTown, they live longer, they live better than other places in the world? I think that would be a good aspiration, especially since we're talking about there's a clear palette here, you know, about health and wellness. Let's strive for something great. Oh, blue zone?
No, this notion of you know, real vision, Cleveland, and yeah, and that people come to help you see because of access to care.
That's
Better
right.
quality of life because you actually stress environment. That's a hell of a work start. Don't write that down. That's
But if you think about it, why do we have such great healthcare? Is it because we're sicker than other people in the world? Or, but that being said, how do we do wellness better than anyone else? I mean, the Cleveland Clinic has, you know, a great group that does a fabulous job. And it's interesting talking to them, you know, if you have a cancer or something, going to integrated medicine instead of having wild pills or stuff like that. How do you eat? How do you exercise? What are the things you do to reduce stress in your life?
That's
You
a
know.
high value proposition. People will move to a place.
And I think a lot of the ideals in the plan around this are how do we translate some of those things for the neighborhoods? Right?
That's
How do we make that accessible? How do we then like public space and green infrastructure and trees and job pipeline and
Social development.
all that, it's all, you know, and I think there's a lot in terms of the work that we've been doing with the anchors around innovation. How do we take the health innovation that's happening and translate that into population health outreach that is really meaningful. Absolutely.
Yeah, be the leader in that. That would be great. Commission members, anything else? Now we're looking to adapt this plan. Yes. Correct, that's great. Any commission members want to make a motion or, you know,
I move to present the plan as presented.
Second,
we have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Michael, call the roll.
Bowen,
Yes.
Downing,
Yes.
Blucher,
Yes.
McCray Scott,
yes,
Paul.
Tammy's here. She was here.
I think she dropped
Oh, we
off.
lost her.
Nope, she's not online.
Okay. Okay, motion carries. I thank you for your presentation.
good work. Thank you all.
You gave me homework, so now I give you homework.
Are we adjourning officially?
Oh, meeting adjourned.
Does everyone have one of these?
I just write my comment.
See you guys Friday.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Bye.